This is the sermon for January 17th, 2021. I'm reading from John 1:43 through 46. The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, "We have found him about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth." Nathanael said to him, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" Philip said to him, "Come and see." Nathanael makes assumptions. We all do that all the time. Nathanael is not surprised, oddly enough, in this passage, that the Messiah has appeared among them. He is surprised that the Messiah seems to be a hometown person from Nazareth. How could that be of any worth at all? I remember in the news from Lake Wobegon, there was an ongoing joke about Lake Wobegon people and Millet people. My assumption is that Millet was down the road, Lake Wobegon was bigger, and they'd say, "You're dating someone from Millet? Really? Millet?" And no doubt Millet people had jokes about Lake Wobegon people as well. I think there are Wisconsin jokes about Minnesotans and Minnesotan jokes about Wisconsinites. I couldn't find any, so if you know one, let me know. Well, apparently the good folks, the good Jewish folks in Israel made jokes and disparaging remarks about people in other tribes or other towns. And so Judah and Israel thought Samaritans were horrible. Apply the worst stereotypes you can think of, that's what Jews thought of Samaritans. We've changed all the meaning of that by calling that parable the Good Samaritans. If you told the story today in the U.S., it would have to be a KKK member from the South who thought highly of himself. He gets mugged and is left for dead alongside the road in his travels. And it's a black man who picks him up, puts him on the donkey, takes him to the inn, pays for the inn, pays for the food, pays for the medical care, and says if he needs anything more, let me know and I'll bring you the money. So that would tell you about how the people of Judah and Israel thought about Samaritans. I attended a workshop that said that it's because Samaritans were considered half-breeds and Israel and Judah were concerned with being pure blood. So anyway, getting back to small towns today, I think there are these jokes that are told between small town rivalries. Well, we've made all these assumptions. We say, "I've seen his type before. Yeah, he'll never change." Or "There's no hope there," or "She ruins everything with her negativity. We just can't include her. No way." Right now in our country, of course, we see bitter rivalry, and I think it's getting worse day by day, which is why I'm still talking about it. We've got to figure out a way. In the church, we call them progressives and traditionalists. And everyone within the division in the church has agreed on those names. And I will say that progressives think highly of themselves because they feel the great need for the world to change and that they're all about making that happen. And traditionalists say, no, there are tried and true methods and everything is worth keeping that we know of. And so we don't want anything to change. Well, you're going to run into problems that way. But what if both are needed? What if traditionalists are needed and progressives are needed? And I have found myself in our conference coming to the aid of a traditionalist when they aren't being listened to by progressives. And I say, hold on a minute. I don't think that you heard what he said. And then I've heard from traditionalists that they'll go to a meeting, they'll sit at a table. In fact, one I know got there early at a meeting. He wanted to see if there was any help needed. And other people that agreed with him came and sat down with him, and progressives sat at all their own tables. And so yeah, it didn't. He said, I left that meeting not knowing anything I didn't know before, and everyone wants to be in a silo where they only hear echo chambers, in other words, that people only hear what they already agree with. Well, what if both groups agree to swing around to one side of the table and we put the issues that need fixing on the other side of the table? Everything could change in that way. Instead of using shorthand stereotypes, instead we want to see something happen for the better. What if? We see that even in our marriages, in the church, as I said, in our extended families. I know what they'll say. I know how they are. That'll never change. What I want to see come in the midst of that is stories of grace. How does God's gentle grace come into the middle of hardened views? How could grace have come into the middle of Nathanael's view of Nazareth? Sometimes we hear stories of change, stories of gentle grace. We hear about God's quiet, persistent grace, and we have tears about that. That's what I want to see. What if Christians led the way? When has grace or unmerited love brought about change in you? That's my question today. I know that grace has brought about change in me. I don't want to stay stuck. So what breaks the cycle of assumptions? I think the key is to look where it hurts. There's a poem where, I don't know, God is looking at the world and saying, where does it hurt? And someone looking at the earth says, all over, all over, all over. It's easy for us to remain quiet while sometimes assuming the worst about others. But where does it hurt? Sometimes our vision becomes narrowed. We close off possibilities. We want something valuable to happen. There could be healing. Faith and grace could make all the difference. God showing up and acting in our lives. Well, I think sometimes we don't want to risk our fears, our prejudices, our losses, or our wounds being touched or being questioned. So we wall off those parts of ourselves. Sometimes we don't want to risk a deeper knowing and being known. This returns to the good questions that I brought up last week. If someone disagrees, ask, help me understand, and genuinely want to know. Help me understand how you came to that view. What does that belief mean to you? And how does it help us all with compassion for one another? That's a question that Christians can ask of one another. What about our knowing God or being known by God? Let's work. Let's be vulnerable in knowing one another and in knowing God. Let's be vulnerable together. It's hard. I ordered a book. It's called There Is No Good Card for This. And I was tickled to get it this week and see that it came in hardback. I can tell it's one I'll be referring to over and over again. The subtitle is What to Say and Do When Life is Scary, Awful, and Unfair to People You Love. So when a terrible thing happens and we don't know what to say, this book helps us understand a little bit better how we can respond. Well, God came to us in Jesus, in a common person, humble. God comes to us in surprising ways. How can we listen to one another and listen deeply? It's hard to see hope in the midst of despair. How can we listen to one another? How can we see beauty in the midst of what seems so bleak? God shows up surprising everyone. And I think we can be open to that. It's the typical American way that we have to earn love. We have to earn a place of honor. We think we have to be good enough. Others sometimes we think are better than we are. They deserve more than we do. Or they are closer to God. They pray better. They know more. Fill in the blank. Occasionally you'll meet someone who thinks they're better than everyone else. I don't meet a lot of people like that. Well, Nathanael has a list of prerequisites for where the Messiah can show up. Where does the Messiah show up for us? Where does Jesus show up? What if we see Christ in the most unlikely places, in the homeless, in the inner city poor? No matter our assumptions, Christ will be gentle about prying those assumptions loose from our clenched hands. It's scary, but it does feel better in the long run. A disciple hearing this story might say, wow, who'd have thunk it? I love that expression. God is working in me. God is working in those people. Come and see. Philip has the right idea. Come and see, Philip says. I think come and see is one of the most hopeful phrases in the whole Bible. Come and see. As Christians, we can say that to others, especially about the places in us and others that hurt. Come and see how grace can make a difference. Come and see how compassion can make a difference. I think there are even non-Christians who find God at work. They might not have the word grace, but it's grace that they see. Come and see, they say. They can say to us, come and see. Maybe we can all see freedoms from limiting assumptions that we share together. Amen.